Watch what happens. I stood on my parents' porch with 3 children huddled behind my back, a single garbage bag resting against my feet, and knocked on the front door just as I had 1,000 times before. It was my mother's house, my father's door, the place where I grew up. Yet, they closed it right in front of my kids. My brother laughed from the hallway. My sister offered a patronizing lecture. Standing there in the cold, I didn't cry. Instead, I made myself a silent, 3-word promise. Watch what happens. This is what happened. 18 months ago, I had what most people would call a decent life. It wasn't a flawless, picture-perfect existence you'd post online for validation, but it was stable. I had a suburban home with a working dishwasher, a minivan with a cracked left tail light I kept meaning to fix, and 3 fast-growing children. Sare was 9. Serious, cautious, and the kind of child who read instruction manuals before opening a toy. Kayla was 6, loud, wild, and utterly convinced she could fly if she just believed hard enough. And Arlo was 4, still small enough to fall asleep against my shoulder, still young enough to believe his mother could fix anything in the world. Then there was Caspian. We had been married for a decade. 10 years is a long time, long enough that I had stopped remembering who I was before him. Nobody warns you about how quietly you can lose yourself inside a marriage, dissolving your own identity one compromise at a time. He wasn't a monster. Monsters are easy to spot. Caspian was charming, inconsistent, and fundamentally allergic to accountability. He never raised his voice, but he possessed an artful way of making every marital fracture feel like it was quietly, definitively my fault. I was a part-time medical records coordinator. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. While I managed the household, school schedules, pediatric appointments, and midnight nightmares, Caspian managed his career as a logistics sales director. His job required long hours and frequent travel, and somewhere along those business trips, he found someone else. I found out through an accidental text on a phone he left unlocked on the kitchen counter. 3 short sentences. That was all it took to evaporate 10 years of marriage in 45 seconds. We tried, briefly and unsuccessfully, to hold things together. Caspian said all the right things, but something deep inside me had permanently shifted. His words no longer carried weight, they just passed through me like wind through a screen door. By spring, I filed for divorce. What I never anticipated was the reaction of my own family. I grew up believing we were tight-knit. My parents, Levitt and Bowen, had been married for 36 years. They were the dependable type who attended every graduation and recital. My brother Landis, 32, lived rent-free in their finished upper floor, using half of it for an elaborate gaming setup. My sister Bryony, 28, was newly married and convinced her brief relationship gave her a master's degree in marital counseling. When I called my mother to tell her about the infidelity and the divorce, asking if the kids and I could stay in their guest room for a few weeks to stabilize, there was a heavy, suffocating pause. Coralie, she said carefully, you know we just don't have the space. My parents' house has 4 bedrooms and a massive finished basement with a pull-out couch and a full bathroom. There was plenty of space. Mom, I just need a few weeks, I pleaded. You need to think about the children's stability, she replied, her voice shifting into a lecture. Caspian is a provider. Mistakes happen. You need to work through this. The next morning, I drove to their house anyway. My father answered the door. His expression was guarded, rehearsed. Your mother and I talked, he said flatly. We don't think it's a good idea for you to stay here. You should go back and try again. Dad, I have nowhere else to go right now, I whispered. Sare's small hand slipped into mine. I squeezed it tight. My brother Landis peeked around my father's shoulder with a smug smirk. There's literally no room, Co. You know how it is. Then Bryony appeared in the hallway, crossing her arms. Honestly, Coralie, this is so impulsive. Caspian isn't a bad guy. Their stability matters more than your hurt feelings right now. Their stability. As if I hadn't been the sole anchor of their stability for their entire lives. Thank you for your input, I said, keeping my voice terrifyingly even. I picked up our garbage bag, buckled my 3 confused children into the minivan, and drove away from my childhood home. We spent our first night in a clean motel 30 minutes out of town. I lay awake that night watching my children sleep in a pile like puppies. I didn't focus on what I had lost. I focused on what I had. A part-time job, a determined lawyer on a payment plan, and a promise whispered on a porch. The months that followed were brutal. There were weeks in that motel, dinners consisting of crackers because I spent my last dollars on new shoes for Arlo, and nights spent crying silently on the bathroom floor. But the story isn't about the suffering, it's about what I built from the ashes. My supervisor, Terrell, a sharp, no-nonsense woman, noticed my work ethic and offered me a full-time position with benefits. I found a modest 2-bedroom apartment near the kids' school. It wasn't fancy, and the bathroom tiles were an outdated 1987 beige, but it was ours. I hung bright yellow curtains chosen by Kayla, and for the first time, I felt the air return to my lungs. During the divorce proceedings, Caspian tried to present himself as a hyper-involved father. But men who don't do the daily work don't have the receipts. My lawyer presented a decade of school records, pediatric logs, and daycare check-ins bearing only my signature. I secured primary physical custody and fair child support. When the settlement news traveled through our small town, my family tried to slide back into my life. My mother called, acting as though she had been rooting for me all along. "We're so relieved it worked out," she said. "Are you?" I asked. When she tried to make excuses, I told her I needed time. Bryony sent long, paragraph-heavy texts apologizing for how her words came out wrong. I replied politely but kept my distance. Landis remained silent. My father sent a generic Christmas card. I realized something profound during those months. Waiting for an apology is just another form of staying, and I refused to stay anywhere I had to beg to be let in. 6 months later, I was promoted to department lead. With the salary increase, I moved us into a beautiful 3-bedroom apartment. Last month, Sare's school held a family showcase. Her project was on the psychology of resilience. At the bottom of her display board, in her neat 10-year-old handwriting, she wrote, "Resilient people don't wait to be rescued. They figure out the next step." I looked at my daughter, who had learned at 10 what it took me over 3 decades to understand. "It's beautiful, Sare," I said. She smiled. "I know. I don't tell this story for sympathy. I have a perfectly working dishwasher, a thriving career, and 3 beautifully vibrant children. I tell this because I know there are women standing at a closed door right now, holding garbage bags and broken hearts, watching their safety nets vanish. If someone tells you there is no room for you, do not beg. The people who claim there is no space for you are usually just terrified of what you will become once you build your own.